calls his signals, has the ball, dropping off with the linebackers, covering receivers. Jim has to run out of it. His receivers covered. Now throws down toward the 5. Moore grabs at it. He's got it. He's got it at the 3-yard line.
I have never seen a quarterback play as well physically as Jim Plunkett did my senior year and his sophomore year. Just a phenomenal quarterback.
If you name the greatest all-around player that could do everything in the first part of this century, up to 1950, there isn't any doubt that it would be Hank Luisetti.
The turning point of that national championship season was Paul Carey's grand slam home run against Ben McDonald in the bottom of the 10th.
Fastball hit high in the air, deep to left field, way back there, gone! A grand slam homer! Stanford wins!
I think one of my greatest thrills was being at Wimbledon in 1982 when Stanford had 8 of the last 32 men in the draw. The next year when there were 4 quarterfinalists, 4 players reached at least the quarterfinals in Wimbledon. These things just send goosebumps up and down my spine when I think about how well these guys have gone on to do.
That's it, Stanford, the winners of the 1985 NCAA Water Polo Championship.
You can't be satisfied with just going to the Final Four. You have to go there to win it. And I think that there wasn't a question in anyone's mind that we were going there to win it.
During the worst part of that game, the Georgia team waving at us on the sideline, waving programs as though we were book learners and sort of mocking us throughout the whole thing, only to have us turn right around and beat them. So that was a great win.
Up court to Lichty with 8. He gets by McMillan. Lichty in the front court with 5, and Stanford is going to beat the #1 team in the nation. Do you believe it?
Hi everybody, I'm Bob Murphy. Welcome to Champions, a century of Stanford sports. In the next 60 minutes, we're going to relive some of the greatest plays, unforgettable moments, and heroic performances in Stanford sports history. To kick things off, let's move over to the gridiron right now for a tribute to Stanford football. Saturday fall afternoons belong to Stanford football. The walk to the stadium, the band, the tailgaters, the team running onto the field to the sound of All Right Now. Yes, each fall season, fans migrate to Stanford Stadium to watch exciting football action. It's been that way for 100 years. On March 19th, 1892, Stanford journeyed to San Francisco to play a football game against the University of California. The legend has it that the young football manager for Stanford, Herbert Hoover, who would later become the 31st president of the United States, forgot to bring one of these, a football. When they finally found one, Stanford won that game 14-10, and the first big game was in the record books. Teammates called him Swede and Big Dog, but many football experts proclaimed Ernie Nevers one of the greatest college football players of all time. Nevers could do it all. He won games with his punting, his passing, and his tackling. His jersey number, 1, is the only one ever to be retired at Stanford. Nevers' coach at the time was a man named Glenn Scobie Warner, better known as Pop Warner, who had built powerful teams at Georgia, Cornell, Carlisle Indian School, and Pittsburgh. He coached at Stanford between 1924 and 1932. Known as an innovator, Pop was credited with creating the single and double wing offensive attacks, as well as the reverse play, the crouching start, and various hidden ball plays. His 1926 squad, which finished undefeated, tying only Alabama 7-7 in the Rose Bowl, was named the nation's #1 team, the only Stanford team ever accorded that honor. After the varsity lost to Southern California for the 5th straight year, Stanford's 1932 undefeated freshman football team made an historic vow: never to lose to USC.
And we were in the dressing room, and USC was hammering our varsity out here, getting showered and everything else, ready to go back. And we were behind. And we've been behind for 3 or 4 years. And somebody said, I can't use the exact words that they said. Wouldn't be nice on TV. But in effect, they said, hey, well, this isn't going to happen to us. We just beat the Tro Babes now, and they're going to be with us for 3 more years. And we're going to hammer those guys, and we're never going to lose to them.
Known as the Vow Boys, they fulfilled their promise by beating the Trojans 3 straight years: 13-7, 16-0, and 3-0. The Vow Boys also shut out unbeaten SMU 7-0 to win the 1936 Rose Bowl. Stanford's 1940 Wow Boys were led by a new coach named Clark Shaughnessy, who had a new idea: to revive the long-forgotten T formation. The results were awesome. Led by All-American quarterback Frankie Albert, the Indians baffled all 10 of their opponents that season, including a 21-13 victory over Nebraska in the Rose Bowl. Thanks to Coach Shaughnessy and the T formation, the game of football would never be the same again. The passing tradition at Stanford has showcased many great All-American quarterbacks over the years, starting with Frankie Albert, who earned national honors in 1940 and 41. In the 1950s, Coach Chuck Taylor took to the air and created the modern aerial attack. Consequently, Stanford produced 3 All-American quarterbacks in this decade. Gary Krikorian led the Indians to a Rose Bowl in 1951. In 1953, Bobby Garrett passed his way to national prominence. And in 1956, it was number 12, John Brody, who would later become a star quarterback with the San Francisco 49ers. The 1970s featured 3 All-American quarterbacks on the farm. In 1970, Jim Plunkett became Stanford's first and only Heisman Trophy winner, directing Stanford to a Rose Bowl victory over Ohio State. In 1973, Mike Barilla earned national honors, leading Stanford to a 7-4 record. And in 1977, Guy Benjamin was the nation's top passer, guiding the Cardinal to a Sun Bowl victory over LSU. The Stanford passing tradition carried over into the 1980s behind rifle-armed quarterback John Elway. Elway was an All-American in 1980 and again in 1982. The year was 1968, when 6'3", 205-pound Jim Plunkett first stepped into Stanford Stadium. His debut was a memorable one, as he threw 4 touchdown passes to Gene Washington in a 68-20 rout of San Jose State.
His passing In that particular era, nobody could match it. There's no question about that. But above that, Jim was just a great athlete. He was very strong. When he ran, you just had the feeling that he was very powerful. And of course, obviously, he was a very intelligent quarterback. John Ralston was a perfect coach for him in that regard because John liked the passing game and took advantage of Plunkett's abilities to do that.
During the next 3 seasons, he rewrote the college football record book, winning the prestigious Heisman Trophy in 1970.
Oh, it's a tremendous honor. When I first started playing, winning the Heisman Trophy probably never entered my mind, and then winning it, it's beyond belief. And I'm very honored, and it means a great deal to me as well as my coaches and teammates and the entire Stanford University.
Well, you're going into the Rose Bowl pretty soon. How do you feel about that?
We're looking forward to that. If Ohio State's the #1 team in the country, and when we go into that game, because they are undefeated, it gives us a chance of knocking out the #1 team in the country, and we're really looking forward to doing that.
The pinnacle for every Stanford football team is the Rose Bowl. All in all, Stanford has made the trip to Pasadena 11 times with an overall record of 5 wins, 5 losses, and 1 tie. One of the greatest games occurred in 1971 when Stanford faced off against Woody Hayes and the powerful Ohio State Buckeyes. Most of the 103,000 fans who packed the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day gave Stanford little chance of beating the #1 ranked Buckeyes. Ohio State was favored by 13 points. The game turned out to be a battle between Stanford's passing game and the powerful Buckeye running attack. One of the key plays of the game took place in the 4th quarter. Ohio State was leading 17-13 and driving deep into Indian territory. They faced a 4th down, needing only 1 foot for a 1st down at the Stanford 20-yard line. Here's Stanford announcer Don Klein with the call.
They need only a foot. As Rex calls the signal, Stanford puts 8 men up front. The handoff is stopped at the 20. We'll see when they unfold. It looks like Stanford is held.
The key play on offense took place late in the game, with Stanford facing a 3rd and 16 at the Buckeye 37-yard line.
Dropping off with the linebackers, covering receivers. Jim has to run out of it. His receivers covered. Now throws down toward the 5. Moore grabs at it. He's got it. He's got it at the 3-yard line.
2 plays later, Jackie Brown scored to put Stanford ahead as the Indians pulled off an incredible upset victory over the nation's top-ranked team.
It was just a tremendous feeling. I think if we'd played that team 10 times, they probably would have beat us 9 out of 10. But that one day, they couldn't beat us. And there were a lot of just great efforts by a lot of different people, Dave Tipton, Jeff Seaman. I mean, the list goes on and on. And, couldn't be prouder of a group of guys than I was of that team.
Beating Ohio State in the 1971 Rose Bowl was one of the great chapters in Stanford football history. However, few would predict that Stanford would travel again to Pasadena the next year to take on the powerful and undefeated Michigan Wolverines. Here's a conversation I had with Coach John Ralston on the eve of that 1972 Rose Bowl game. Some people say that Michigan has not been tested by a good passing team and that Stanford is a good passing team. How do you feel about that?
Well, we hope that we can throw the ball, Bob, but it's not the only way to go for our Stanford football team. We've got to be able to run and maintain a ground game if we're going to be successful.
Led by quarterback Don Bunce, the Indians were once again the big underdogs in Pasadena. Big Ten champ Michigan was highly favored to win it, as many people felt Stanford couldn't do it again without Plunkett. However, Bunce proved everyone wrong by throwing for 290 yards. It was his 5 straight passes in the closing drive of the game that enabled Rod Garcia to kick a 31-yard field goal with 12 seconds left to stun Michigan 13-12. In the late 1970s, Stanford football entered a new age. Leading the way was Coach Bill Walsh.
When I came from professional football to become the head coach at Stanford University, we installed the San Diego Charger offense and then some, expanded it from the professionals. Our guys were treated as men. When I came in, I said, we're not talking about anything. You're a man, I'm a man. We're going on first name basis and we're going to get something done. And we're going to test you physically, but just as important, mentally. They assimilated an offense that the professionals couldn't even assimilate. That we then took the 49ers and had great success. But in just a few weeks, we had the most exciting and the most successful and effective offense in college football.
The Bill Walsh era featured an explosive offense with superstars like running back Darren Nelson, receiver Kenny Marjoram, and quarterback Steve Dills. Perhaps no rivalry in college football has as much history, color, controversy, and excitement as the big game. Stanford and Cal have been squaring off against each other since 1891. The cherished axe was first displayed in 1899 and has been a symbol of victory ever since. There have been many memorable moments over the years, featuring some unforgettable last-second heroics. In 1974, Mike Langford hit a 50-yard field goal on the game's final play to defeat Cal 22-20. 2 years later, the Bears led 24-19 with a little over 2 minutes remaining, but fumbled on their own 2-yard line to set up a game-winning touchdown by Stanford's Ron Inge. Maybe the greatest comeback by a Stanford team took place in the 1990 big game. Here's how the announcers at KZSU called those final moments.
The win in the 93rd big game. The snap, the kick is long enough. It looks good. It is! The Cardinals won. No time remaining. Stanford wins 27-25. The Cardinals won. Oh my! Once again, the Cardinals will whip the gold and the blue.
In the early 1930s, the game of basketball was played with a rather East Coast conservative ball control offense and man-to-man defense. But on the evening of December 30th, 1936, a young group of Stanford basketball players led by the immortal Angelo Hank Luisetti traveled to New York, and they changed the game forever. In 1936, Hank Luisetti and the Laughing Boys from Stanford traveled 3,000 miles to Madison Square Garden in New York City to take on Coach Clair B and his powerful Long Island University team.
Stanford with a 12-point lead. Hank Luisetti brings it into the front court once again. He's 15 feet away. The one-hand jump shot is up. It's good! He has 15 points on the night. Stanford will win it 45-31. Long Island University's 43-game win streak comes to an end. The Stanford Laughing Boys doing all the smiling now.
What shocked fans even more was the introduction of the one-hand shot by Luisetti, as he became the first player to master this unorthodox style of shooting.
We were the first ones out in the West to open up the game because even when I was in high school, we used to have to pass the ball a lot, even my shot, because most of the time the coaches, when you shot, you had to put your feet together, take a two-hand shot. Well, I was fortunate enough to have a coach. I started fooling around with the one-hand shot in high school. He left me alone, and I scored a few points with it, but I was able to get around my man quicker, and also you can release the ball faster.
Many coaches called his running one-handers freakish and fundamentally unsound. They were sure it would never last. Hank went on to become a 3-time All-American and a 2-time College Player of the Year, and his shooting style would change the game forever. The 1942 Stanford basketball team had a starting lineup that averaged 6 feet 4 inches. In an era when any player over 6 feet was considered a big man, the Indians were truly giants of their time. The starting 5 consisted of forwards Jim Pollard at 6'5", Don Burness at 6'3", center Ed Voss at 6'5½", guards Bill Cowden at 6'3", and Howie Dalmar at 6'4".
Everybody was a center on that team in high school. The 2 guards, Burness and Cowden, myself and Jim Pollard, the All-American, and Ed Voss. But we were all centers, and a couple of us had to make the adjustments to the guard, but that was easy because there was everybody was so active and quick in that team.
Along with their size, this incredible team had speed as well, as the Indians blazed to the NCAA finals against Dartmouth. Coach Everett Dean was without his 2 All-Americans, Pollard and Burness, who missed the final due to illness. It really didn't matter. Led by MVP Howie Dalmar, Stanford routed Dartmouth 53-38 to win the national title. Today, Roscoe Maples Pavilion is home to Stanford basketball. This is where great players like Rich Kelly and Kim Belton and Todd Lichty and Jennifer Azey have performed their magic. Over the years, there have been some great victories here. You might even call some of them miracles. The first miracle occurred in 1975, when center Rich Kelly led Stanford to a shocking weekend sweep of powerful UCLA and USC.
I'll never forget after the SC game, which was the second one, the fans just stomping onto the floor and making that old Maples floor do that Beach Boys swim, and it was quite a weekend.
Miracle number 2 took place in 1977. The opponent, Kiki Vandeweghe, and the UCLA Bruins. This time, forward Kimberly Belton performed the heroics.
Okay? Hey, we can make it happen, man. We got momentum going our way. 44. We're going to do it, Gary. We're going to do it.
The final miracle took place in 1989 as Todd Lichty and Howard Wright led the Cardinal to an upset victory over number 1 ranked Arizona.
Taylor on him. Kerr up for a long jump. It is no good. Rebound baseline. Howard Wright with 9. Up court to Lichty with 8. He gets by McMillan. Lichty in the front court with 5, and Stanford is going to beat the number 1 team in the nation. Do you believe it? Do you believe it? It's crazy. They're all out on the floor. The world has come on. The pavilion has gone berserk as Stanford has beaten the number 1 team in the nation.
In 1896, the Stanford women's basketball team defeated Cal 2-1. Some 100 years later, the basketball program continues to win its games. However, the scoring has increased a little bit. If you talk about dream seasons, the 1990 team came as close to perfection as possible.
We are Pac-10 champions. Let's play like champions. Work hard. Just have fun, guys. Let's go. Have fun. Let's go, Stanford. 1, 2, 3. Let's go, Stanford!
Coach Tara Vanderveer's club won 32 of 33 games and won the national championship. Along the way, they broke 50 Stanford and 40 Pac-10 and 10 NCAA tournament records. It was truly an unforgettable season.
I think winning a national championship is something that you can't really put into words. You know, it's 4 years of hard work kind of paid off all at one time, and you know, I cared a lot about my teammates, and I know my teammates cared a lot about me, so it was kind of a really special time.
Stanford capped off the 1990-91 regular season by earning a trip to the National Invitational Tournament. Led by NIT Most Valuable Player Adam Keefe, the Cardinals stunned Oklahoma 78-72 to win the title. Stanford became only the second Pac-10 team to win the NIT and only the 13th school in intercollegiate history to win both the NCAA and the NIT crowns. In the spring of 1892, not long after Stanford had played its first football game, a group of students organized a baseball team to represent the new university. The first game was played against a semi-pro team called the San Jose Pros on a makeshift diamond near Encina Hall. The results? Predictable. Stanford was clobbered 20-1. Over the many years, Stanford baseball has improved dramatically. It's been a tradition of excellence ever since, producing 13 conference titles, 12 appearances in postseason play, and 8 trips to Omaha, as well as producing some outstanding players. Bob Boone, Steve Dunning, Dr. Bobby Brown, and great player and longtime coach Mark Marcus. Stanford's produced its share of All-Americans over the years, and they've all played right here in this beautiful sunken diamond, considered by many to be the finest collegiate park in the country. But you know, it wasn't until the late 1980s that Stanford reached the very top in baseball. The Cardinal won 2 NCAA championships in a row. Stanford entered postseason play in 1987 full of confidence. They had a super pitching staff that featured Jack McDowell, and they had a potent offense with seniors Ruben Amaro and Toy Cook. However, the season seemed over when Stanford fell behind LSU 5-2 in the bottom of the 10th inning. With bases loaded, freshman Paul Carey came to the plate.
The funny thing is that I thought, you know, the wind is blowing out the left. He's a left-hand hitter. It's unusual for a left-hand hitter to hit it to the left. I said, but if he gets the ball up, we could win this.
Fastball hit high in the air, deep to left field, way back there, gone! A grand slam homer! Stanford wins!
It's one of those things that happens in sports, and I've been in sports almost all my life, that you just can't believe. It's like it was, you know, the script was made in Hollywood, and it was something I'll never forget. I'm sure Paul Carey and a lot of Stanford baseball fans will never forget.
There was no stopping this team now as they went on to win Stanford's first national title. The following year, Stanford once again made it to the College World Series. No one gave the Cardinal much of a chance to repeat. Behind senior pitcher Lee Plemmel, catcher Doug Robbins, and first baseman Ron Whitmire, Stanford went 5-1 in the tourney to win their second straight national championship. Right behind me is where John McEnroe and Roscoe Tanner and Tim Mayotte and now Jared Palmer have played their tennis. And it's where Patty Fendick and Kathy Jordan and Alicia Moulton and now Sandra Birch have played their tennis. So I guess the answer to the question is, when you take great talent, add to it great coaching, and then provide superb tennis facilities, you're talking, number one, about champions, number two, about championships, and number three, most importantly, you're talking about Stanford tennis. The word dynasty seems best to describe Stanford's tennis program. The architects of this tennis empire are Dick Gould and Frank Brennan, the Stanford men's and women's tennis coaches. They've created a winning tradition unmatched by any other university in the country.
The NCAA just celebrated their 10th anniversary of women's athletics, and they named an all-decade team. And there were 5 Stanford players named to this 10-man squad. So starting off with just the NCAA champions that we've had, Alicia Moulton, Linda Gates, Patty Fendick, Debbie Graham, and Sandra Birch from our current team were also named to that all-decade team. So we had 5 of the 10 all-time best.
When you talk about memories of Stanford, I go back to my student days. I think nothing can top the experience of being a student athlete at Stanford. And I look at it selfishly from that standpoint. And of course, I think that reflects in my recruiting. And I recruit with enthusiasm because I know what a wonderful opportunity a student athlete will have here.
Dick Gould, when he was recruiting me, said, sure, you can go to SC or UCLA, and if you win an NCAA title, it means nothing. He says they win them all the time. But at that point, Stanford hadn't won one for 40 years. So he said, it's a challenge. We can start something.
The men have won a total of 11 team titles, while the women have captured 7 NCAA crowns. The list of champions reads like a who's who of tennis. Tanner, McEnroe, Mayotte, Moulton, Fendick, Birch, and that's just to name a few. Here's a list of all the NCAA men's and women's singles and doubles champions. When you talk about champions, you have to talk about the Stanford swimming and water polo teams. Over the years, the Cardinal Aquatic teams have combined for 10 NCAA championships. It all started many years ago, but in 1967, well, that was one of the most competitive swim meets in NCAA history. These home movies were taken of the 1967 NCAA swimming championships. Going into the meet, only 4 teams had ever won the team title: USC, Yale, Ohio State, and Michigan. Stanford had produced many individual champions, but had never won the team title.
Stanford was picked to be 3rd or 4th in the meet, and in fact, the newspaper articles that came out after the 2nd day of the meet says 2-team battle between Indiana and USC, and didn't even mention Stanford. And the 3rd day, Stanford comes through and wins the meet. And somebody had some foresight, because there was T-shirts that came out even before that last relay finish that says 1967 Stanford NCAA champions.
The tradition of excellence in Stanford swimming is firmly rooted in the history of the program. Cardinal swimmers have stockpiled a total of 31 gold, 13 silver, and 5 bronze medals in Olympic competition. The men's team has won 4 national titles, while the women have earned 2 NCAA crowns. The list of individual champions is a long and proud tribute to an outstanding program.
7 seconds, 6 seconds. Stanford does not need a shot. They've got the lead. It looks like the ball game. That's it. Stanford, the winners of the 1985 NCAA Water Polo Championship.
I'm most proud of the fact that we are consistently in the top 3 or 4 in the nation year after year. We may not win the national championship every year, but we're in the running, and we are competitive.
Over the years, no collegiate water polo team has enjoyed as much success as Stanford University. The Cardinal has won 6 NCAA titles, placed second 3 times, third 3 times, and fourth on 2 occasions. Stanford is the only school in history to have had 2 undefeated seasons. The 1981 team went 31-0, while the 1986 squad finished with a perfect 36-0 record. You know, one of the nice things about being a Stanford athlete, marvelous facilities. This golf course has been rated one of the best in the country since it was built back in the 1930s. I used to spend a lot of time here as an undergraduate, still happen by here on a rare occasion. You know, another thing, some 600 young men and women compete in the Stanford athletic program. You hear a lot about football and basketball and, of course, all those tennis titles, but the fact is there are lots of other sports and lots of other championships, too. In golf, Coach Eddie Twiggs guided Stanford golfers to 6 NCAA team championships between 1938 and 1946. Frank Sandy Tatum won the individual title in 1942. There have been other great players to walk across the fairways at Stanford, most notably superstar Tom Watson, who played at the Farm between 1969 and 1971. Stanford athletes have also won NCAA individual titles in fencing, Nick Braven, 1990, foil, and 9 individual titles in men's gymnastics. Dink Templeton coached Stanford's track and field teams to 3 crowns in 1925, 28, and 34. Over the years, Stanford's track and field program has produced some outstanding athletes. We now honor these individual NCAA champions. Without a doubt, the greatest athlete in Stanford history was track and field star Bob Mathias. At 6'3" and 200 pounds, Mathias was a virtual one-man track team. Mathias became the only man in history to win the Olympic decathlon twice, at the 1948 and 1952 games.
I think I was really lucky in '52 because I was a junior at Stanford. Had a great coach, Jack Weyerhaeuser, Ray Dean, and some other team members. And of course, Stanford had a good track schedule. So my situation there was I had a coach, a good place to train. The athletic department sent us on other competitions, so we didn't have to worry financially about getting to a meet. So everything was really ideal in '52.
What some people might forget is that Bob Mathias was also a heck of a football player at Stanford.
Mathias deep, receives the kick at the 4, follows his blocking. Beautifully coming up the right side. He might go all the way. Frank Gifford has the last shot at him. He'll ramble all the way in for an amazing 96-yard touchdown.
For the past 100 years, Stanford athletes have carried on a tradition of excellence, both on and off the playing field. It's been an incredible century. Magical moments, legendary competitors. For my part, I just feel so fortunate to be a part of such a proud heritage. To be a part of a Stanford family that includes the Val boys, Jim Plunkett, Hank Luisetti, and all the rest of them. Now, before we leave, one final tribute to the men and women of Stanford, the ones we're so proud to call champions.